In the gospel lesson we just heard, Jesus is leaving Jericho with his disciples. There's a large crowd around them and a blind beggar named Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus calls out for Jesus for mercy and healing, and people tell him to be quiet. Bartimaeus ignores them and keeps calling out for Jesus, and Jesus hears him calling out and says to those around them, "Go get him. Bring him here." Fast forward to this past week. Twitter user Carlos Rodriguez wrote, "As soon as you draw a line to exclude people, Jesus goes to the other side of that line with them and invites you to join him there every single time." My, my, my. What a week it has been. It started with a leaked memo from the current administration in Washington advocating making gender reassignment illegal. This memo is trying to outlaw people from identifying as the opposite sex, no matter how much pain they're in, no matter how much their core identity is rooted in that opposite gender. This memo suggests outlawing being transgender. That is how the week started. It continued with an increased demonizing of a group of people forming a caravan as they flee life-threatening violence in Honduras. It segued into a rash of bombs being sent to Democratic leaders and supporters, and ended with a massacre at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. What a week. This is all 1 week in the U.S. If you are angry, I am angry too. If you feel a deep, soul-shattering sorrow, I do too. Now, before I go any further, even before the shooting at the synagogue yesterday, I had registered for a workshop offered by the ADL on keeping houses of worship safe. It is on November 13th. And while I do not feel anxious about this particular sacred space, I do want all the tools and information that is available to protect all of you. But back to this past week, things seem so bad in our country that people I know and I'm fond of are seriously considering moving to Costa Rica or Canada. And if I'm going to be honest, I get frustrated with that kind of thinking. These folks have no children, no parents, no dependents. They are educated and with stable jobs. They are white. And because of all of that, they, and all of us like that, have a responsibility to join Jesus on the other side of that line. If not us, then who? Who? If those of us who have a choice and the resources to leave do in fact leave, then who is left to advocate for those who are at most risk, who bear the brunt of our country's worst impulses? I get so irritated when folks talk about leaving. I know folks are anxious, but I want to say, calm the heck down and get to work. Get over yourself and your exaggerated fears and make a difference in the lives of people who have it far harder than you ever will. Good Lord. Likewise, I have a friend who said to me just yesterday that she's tremendously proud of the work I do for justice, but she doesn't think it changes anything. I disagree. Every time you cast a light into a dark place, it makes a difference. It makes a difference to the people living in that dark place. They know they are not alone. When I was at the border last year, I spent an evening at a shelter in Mexico. The shelter was for people who had just been deported from the U.S. It was late. They had just been delivered to the shelter by Mexican authorities. Their belongings were in trash bags at their feet, and while they waited to be processed by shelter staff, we talked to them. One woman tearfully wondered when she would ever see her children again, and yet she was so relieved that people from the U.S. saw her as a human being and not a criminal, saw her pain, that her eyes welled with tears of gratitude and relief. No, we were not going to change immigration policy that night, but for those people in that cramped room, it mattered that we were there. It mattered that we were bearing witness. Likewise, in Haiti after the earthquake, I will never be able to fix the impact of 400 years of colonization, let alone an earthquake. But listening to people describe their fears, listening to people talk of loved ones and livelihoods and humble homes lost, that made a difference to those folks. They knew they were not alone. Does it make a difference? Yes, it also makes a difference to other people who see you shining your light. Your witness is an example. Your witness emboldens friends, family, acquaintances to step up and shine their light. Those women who mobilized last year created a lasting impact. Folks who never went to a rally before found themselves on streets all over the country. People who were casual about their responsibility to vote became intentional. Your witness makes a difference. Lastly, but equally importantly, it makes a difference to the state of your own soul, because every time you do something to right a wrong, you say, I recognize the image of God in everyone, and I will not allow anyone to desecrate that image in another person. Our salvation is linked to the salvation of everyone around us. If we allow the power of sin to affect other people, it will ultimately affect us. We end up being part of systems that treat people as things, or worse, as less than human, certainly as less than us. And every time we treat someone as less than us, we elevate ourselves and minimize the image of God in other people. And that is sin. Our salvation is linked to other people's salvation, and we must bear witness. We cannot let our despair overwhelm us or paralyze us. We can grieve, we can yell, but we must not let it overwhelm us. Lives depend on it. As for my friend who said she doubted all the stuff I do makes a difference, I am sure people questioned what difference the Underground Railroad made to the slaves. It wouldn't end slavery, right? So why bother risking life and arrest? I am sure people told Rosa Parks that her bus boycott wouldn't change anything. I am sure reasonable people didn't think Martin Luther's nailing his complaints about the church in Rome on a church door would change anything. I am sure people told Martin Luther King that his speeches wouldn't change anything. I am sure people told Mahatma Gandhi that his protestations against injustice wouldn't change anything. I am sure reasonable people told Harriet Beecher Stowe that her advocating for publicly funded primary education was a waste of time trying to educate the poor. I am sure that revolutionaries and reformers the world over and throughout time were told they could not change things, but they have, and they did. Until Harriet Beecher Stowe, only the rich educated their children, and because of her, we have public education. It is flawed, to be sure, but everybody gets a chance to learn. Because of Martin Luther, we had a reformation of the church, a reforming of the church that addressed many of the worst excesses of a state religion. Because of Martin Luther King, black folks were granted the right to vote. The list is endless of people who changed things by standing up when they saw something wrong, no matter what other people said. Raoul Wallenberg made visas for Jews about to be deported to the death camps. And Oskar Schindler saved even more Jews by employing them at his factory. What difference did it make to save a couple of hundred Jews? You might want to ask their descendants. Go ahead. Ask their descendants. The list is endless of people who made a difference. So, I'm going to call people on their stuff when they talk about fleeing an uncomfortable situation. And I'm going to ignore the naysayers. And I'm going to join Jesus on the other side of the line every time our society draws that line, or any line, to keep people out. Every single time. There's an immigration rally tomorrow at 8th and Arch. I will be there in collar. But the invitation to join Jesus on the other side of that line isn't just addressed to me, it's addressed to all of us. And so I say to you, your move. Your move. Let's sing.